He thought he had a suspect in cuffs. He didn't know he was manhandling the very man who signed his search warrants. Picture this: a quiet Sunday evening in an upscale neighborhood. A man sits on his own porch sipping tea, enjoying the fruits of a long career in federal law. Then a patrol car screeches to a halt. An arrogant officer steps out, hand on his holster, eyes full of prejudice, seeing not a judge, but a target. What happens next is a masterclass in patience, a shocking display of abuse, and the most satisfying career-ending karma you will ever hear. You think you know how this ends? You have no idea. Stay tuned, because Officer Shane Whitaker is about to learn that justice is blind, but it isn't deaf. The heat of the Georgia afternoon had finally broken, leaving behind a honey-colored twilight that draped over the manicured lawns of Oak Creek Estates. It was the kind of silence that cost money. The neighborhood was a sprawling labyrinth of colonial revivals and modern farmhouses set far back from the road behind weeping willows and rigid oak trees. For Marcus Ellison, this silence was not just a luxury, it was a necessity. At middle age, Marcus carried the weight of the federal bench on his shoulders. As a federal magistrate judge for the Northern District, his days were consumed by bond hearings, warrant applications, and the grim, endless parade of human error that flowed through the courthouse. He dealt with cartels, white-collar fraudsters, and interstate traffickers. His mind was a steel trap of case law and constitutional precedents, honed by decades of grinding work, first as a fiercely intelligent public defender, then as a relentless prosecutor, and finally as the man with the gavel. But here, on his wraparound porch, he wasn't Your Honor. He was just Marcus. He was dressed in his Sunday worst, as his wife Olivia liked to call it, a faded, oversized gray hoodie from his undergraduate days at Howard University, and a pair of loose basketball shorts. He was barefoot, his toes resting on the cool, painted wood of the decking. In his hand was a glass of iced tea, the condensation dripping onto his knuckles. He took a sip, closing his eyes. The only sound was the rhythmic thwop-thwop of a sprinkler 3 houses down and the distant hum of a lawnmower. He loved this house. He had bought it a few years ago, the culmination of a lifetime of breaking ceilings. He was one of only a few black families in Oak Creek, a statistic that didn't bother him, though it certainly seemed to bother the neighborhood watch app from time to time. He picked up his tablet, scrolling through a draft opinion he needed to file soon. He adjusted his reading glasses, lost in the nuances of Fourth Amendment search and seizure laws. The irony of what was about to happen would not be lost on him later. But in that moment, the law was just words on a screen, abstract, logical, and safe. A blue jay landed on the railing, chirping loudly. Marcus smiled without looking up. "I hear you, little man. Court is adjourned." He didn't notice the black and white SUV creeping down the street. It was moving slower than the posted limit, prowling like a shark in shallow water. It wasn't a neighborhood security vehicle. It was a city police cruiser, slightly out of its usual jurisdiction, but technically within the bounds of the county mutual aid agreement. The cruiser slowed as it passed the Miller residence. It slowed again at the corner. Then it came to a complete, silent stop directly in front of Marcus's driveway. Marcus turned a page on his tablet, oblivious. He reached for his tea, missing the coaster slightly, and correcting. The car door opened. A heavy boot hit the pavement. Officer Shane Whitaker adjusted his belt. Whitaker was young, with a haircut that was high and tight, and a demeanor that was wound tighter. He had transferred to the department recently from a rural county a couple of hours north, bringing with him a thick personnel file that had been conveniently overlooked during the hiring shortage. He was the type of officer who viewed the community not as people to protect, but as terrain to be occupied. To Whitaker, everyone was guilty of something, It was just a matter of finding the statute. Whitaker scanned the house. A pristine lawn, a luxury sedan in the driveway, and a black man in a hoodie sitting on the porch staring at a tablet. In Whitaker's mind, the equation didn't balance. The hoodie didn't match the sedan. The man didn't match the zip code. The narrative in Whitaker's head, fed by years of unchecked bias and an echo chamber of cynicism, wrote the script instantly. Look out. Burglar. Squatter. Marcus finally looked up as the car door slammed shut. He squinted through his glasses, seeing the uniformed officer walking up his long driveway. He didn't feel fear. He was a federal judge, after all. He felt a mild annoyance. He assumed the officer was soliciting for the police benevolent fund, or perhaps notifying neighbors about a lost dog. Marcus set his tablet down on the wicker table. He remained seated, his posture relaxed. He didn't stand up. He didn't wave. He waited. Whitaker walked with his thumbs hooked near his belt buckle, his chest puffed out. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, about 10 feet from where Marcus sat. The elevation difference meant Marcus was looking down at him. A dynamic Whitaker clearly despised. "Help you, officer?" Marcus asked. His voice was a deep baritone, the kind of voice that commanded a courtroom without shouting. Whitaker didn't answer immediately. He chewed gum aggressively, scanning the windows of the house as if expecting accomplices to jump out. Finally, his eyes locked onto Marcus. "You live here?" Whitaker asked. "No, sir," Marcus said simply. "Good evening. Yes, I do." It was just the accusation disguised as a question. Marcus sighed, the annoyance ticking up a notch. He knew this dance. He had seen it in 1,000 case files. He had defended young men who were stopped for less. But he was tired. It was Sunday. "I do," Marcus said simply. He picked up his tea again. "Can I help you with something specific?" Whitaker's eyes narrowed. The lack of deference was triggering him. He was used to fear. He was used to, "Yes, sir," and "Sorry, sir." He wasn't used to a man in gym shorts looking at him like he was a minor inconvenience. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," Whitaker lied. There were no reports. The dispatch log was empty. "Break-ins. Porch pirates. Is that right?" Marcus took a sip of tea. "I haven't seen anything, but I appreciate the patrol. You can carry on." It was a dismissal, a polite verbal door slam. Whitaker didn't move. He took one step up the stairs. The wood creaked. "I'm going to need to see some ID," Whitaker said, his hand drifting closer to his radio. Marcus lowered his glass. The air on the porch suddenly felt very heavy. The birds seemed to stop singing. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of the magistrate. "I am sitting on my own private property. I am not operating a vehicle. I am not suspected of a crime. I am under no legal obligation to identify myself to you." Whitaker's face flushed a deep, angry red. He took another step up. He was now on the porch proper. "I'm conducting an investigation," Whitaker snapped. "And you fit the description of a suspect we're looking for." "Which suspect?" Marcus challenged, his eyes hard behind his spectacles. "What description? Be specific, officer. Height? Weight? Clothing? Or is the description just black man in Oak Creek?" "Don't get smart with me." Whitaker pointed a finger. "Stand up. Hands where I can see them." "My hands are right here," Marcus said, gesturing with the tea glass. "And I am not standing up. You are trespassing. Unless you have a warrant or probable cause that a crime is being committed right now, I suggest you turn around and walk back to your vehicle." It was the tipping point. For Officer Shane Whitaker, this wasn't about the law anymore. It was about dominance. It was about a man he viewed as lesser daring, to quote the rules. Whitaker unclipped the retention strap on his holster. He didn't draw the gun, but the threat was explicit. He reached for his radio with his other hand. "Dispatch, show me out at 4402 Oak Creek. I've got an uncooperative subject. Possible 1080. Marcus shook his head, a look of profound pity crossing his face. "You are making a mistake," he said softly. "A very expensive, life-altering mistake." "Stand up!" Whitaker screamed, his hand moving to his taser. "Last warning." The shout echoed off the stately brick facades of the neighboring houses. Across the street, Mrs. Carver, a retired schoolteacher with a penchant for gardening and nosiness, paused while deadheading her roses. She peered over her hedge, her eyes widening as she saw the uniformed officer screaming at the nice man who always waved when he got the mail. She fumbled for her phone, not to record, but to call the police on the police, confused by the tableau. On the porch, the dynamic had shifted from tense to volatile. Marcus Ellison remained seated. He knew the case law regarding contempt of cop. He knew that any sudden movement, even to stand up, could be interpreted as furtive or a bladed stance in a qualified immunity hearing. He had written opinions granting summary judgments to officers in difficult situations, and he had denied them in cases of clear abuse. He knew exactly where the line was. Officer Whitaker had just sprinted across it. "I am telling you for the last time," Marcus said, articulating every syllable with judicial precision. "I am Magistrate Judge Marcus Ellison. I reside at this address. You have no probable cause to detain me." The words, "Magistrate Judge," bounced off Whitaker's consciousness like pebbles off a tank. He didn't hear a title. He heard a lie. In Whitaker's limited worldview, federal judges didn't wear hoodies. They didn't sit on porches in basketball shorts. They were old white men in oak-paneled rooms. This man was lying, and lying was resistance. "I don't care who you say you are," Whitaker yelled, stepping forward and kicking the wicker table. The table skidded, and the glass of iced tea toppled, shattering on the deck. Amber liquid pooled around Marcus's bare feet. "That's destruction of property," Marcus noted calmly, though his heart rate was beginning to climb. He was disciplined, but he was human. The adrenaline was dumping into his system. "You're under arrest!" Whitaker lunged. He grabbed Marcus by the wrist, yanking him upward. Marcus was a big man, broad-shouldered and heavy, not easily moved. He didn't fight back, but he didn't help. He went limp, a tactic of passive resistance. "Stop resisting!" Whitaker screamed, the mantra of the aggressor, ensuring the body cam audio favored him. He twisted Marcus's arm behind his back with excessive force, leveraging the shoulder joint painfully. Marcus grunted, pain shooting up his rotator cuff. "I am not resisting," he gritted out. "I am complying with your unlawful assault to prevent you from shooting me." "Shut up!" Whitaker shoved Marcus face first against the siding of his own house. The rough brick scratched Marcus's cheek. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked onto Marcus's left wrist. Whitaker wrenched the arm up high, forcing Marcus to bend forward, then grabbed the right hand. Click, click, click. The ratchets tightened until they bit into the skin. "They're too tight," Marcus said. "Loosen them." "Comfort isn't a priority for criminals," Whitaker spat, breathing heavily. He was pumped full of adrenaline, high on the capture. He had the suspect secured. He felt powerful. He dragged Marcus to the edge of the porch steps. "Sit down." "I was sitting down before you attacked me," Marcus replied dryly. He sat awkwardly on the top step, his hands pinned behind him, the metal digging into his spine. By now, the neighborhood was waking up. Mrs. Carver had been joined by Mr. Harlan from next door, a corporate tax attorney who knew Marcus professionally. Harlan was jogging across his lawn, phone in hand, recording. "Hey!" Harlan shouted from the sidewalk. "Officer, what are you doing?" "That's Judge Ellison." Whitaker whipped his head around. "Back up. Step back, or you're next for obstruction." You're arresting a federal magistrate on his own porch, Harlan yelled, holding his phone steady. I'm live streaming this, you idiot. You have no idea what you've done. Whitaker hesitated. The word judge, coming from a white man in a polo shirt, hit different than it did coming from the suspect. Doubt flickered in his eyes for a microsecond, but his ego smothered it. He had already committed. To back down now would be to admit weakness. He doubled down. He refused to identify. He resisted arrest, Whitaker shouted back. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch, I have one in custody. I need a supervisor on scene. Hostile crowd forming. Hostile crowd? Marcus chuckled darkly from the step. It's 2 neighbors, officer, and they are witnesses. Marcus shifted his weight. The pain in his shoulder was throbbing. Officer, I have a medical condition. My circulation is being cut off. You are required to check the fit of the cuffs. You'll survive, Whitaker sneered, leaning against the porch railing, trying to look casual while his heart hammered against his ribs. He felt the eyes of the neighbors. He saw more phones coming out. Inside the house, Olivia Ellison had been napping. The shouting woke her. She came to the front door, opening it just as Whitaker was leaning back. She saw her husband, the man she had loved for decades, handcuffed like a common criminal on their porch steps, bleeding slightly from a scratch on his face. She didn't scream. Olivia was a former emergency room nurse. She went cold. Marcus, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Stay inside, Olivia, Marcus said quickly. Call Chief Pierce. Use the personal number. Tell him his boys are lost. Whitaker turned to Olivia. Ma'am, step back inside. This is a crime scene. This is my house, Olivia snapped, her eyes blazing. And that is my husband. What is he charged with? Being black on a Sunday? He's detained for investigation of burglary and resisting arrest, Whitaker said, reciting the script. Burglary? Olivia let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. He's wearing his college hoodie. The keys to that car are in his pocket, you absolute fool. She slammed the door, not to retreat, but to get to the phone. Whitaker shifted uneasily. The narrative was crumbling. The burglar had a wife inside the house. The hostile crowd was shouting legal statutes at him. And the man in cuffs was sitting there with a look of terrifying calm. Marcus looked up at Whitaker. You know, he said conversationally, I signed a warrant for a Title III wiretap this morning. I spoke with the U.S. attorney about police misconduct protocols last week. And right now, I'm thinking about 42 U.S. Code Section 1983. Do you know what that is, Officer Whitaker? Whitaker didn't answer. He stared at the driveway, praying for backup. It's the statute that allows me to sue you personally, Marcus continued. Not just the department. You, your pension, your house, that truck I saw you pull up in. It's going to be mine. Shut up, Whitaker yelled, his voice cracking. Then the sirens started. Not one, not two, but a symphony of them. First, the local precinct backup. 2 more cruisers screeched around the corner, lights flashing. Then a black SUV with tinted windows. Then another unmarked sedan. Whitaker exhaled, thinking the cavalry had arrived to save him. He watched as 2 officers from his shift, Torres and Bennett, jumped out of the first cruiser. They ran up the driveway, hands on their holsters. Whitaker, you good? Torres shouted. Yeah, suspect is non-compliant. Crowd is. Torres skidded to a halt. He looked at the man sitting on the steps. He looked at the house. He looked at the luxury sedan. He looked at Marcus's face. Torres's face drained of color. He had been in Marcus's courtroom recently for a suppression hearing. He had been grilled by Marcus on proper chain of custody. Oh no, Torres whispered. He looked at Whitaker with wide, horrified eyes. Whitaker, take them off. What? Take them off right now, Torres hissed, lunging forward. That's Judge Ellison, you moron. He wouldn't ID. Before Torres could reach the keys, the black SUV slammed into the curb, hopping the grass slightly. The door flew open. Chief of Police Harlan Pierce stepped out. He wasn't in uniform. He was in golf attire, his face purple with exertion and rage. He didn't walk. He stormed. Behind him, the unmarked sedan stopped. 2 men in suits got out. FBI. They had been working a case with Marcus and were nearby when Olivia called. Whitaker froze. He saw his chief sprinting up the lawn. He saw the suits. He looked down at Marcus. Marcus looked up, a small, wintry smile playing on his lips. "Hello, Harlan," Marcus said calmly to the chief of police. "Your officer here seems to think I'm a burglar." Chief Pierce didn't look at Marcus. He looked at Whitaker, and the look he gave him was enough to wither a soul. "Officer Whitaker," Pierce said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "If you do not have those cuffs off in the next few seconds, I will personally throw you through that window." The silence that followed Chief Pierce's threat was heavier than the humid Georgia air. It was a suffocating, dense silence that seemed to press down on Officer Shane Whitaker's chest. Whitaker's hands shook. The adrenaline that had fueled his aggression moments ago had curdled into a cold, sickly dread. He fumbled for the handcuff key on his belt, his fingers slipping on the metal. He couldn't find the slot. "Give me that," Officer Torres snarled, snatching the keys from Whitaker's trembling hand. Torres didn't look at Whitaker. He couldn't. The second-hand embarrassment and the sheer terror of the situation made him want to vanish. Torres moved behind Marcus, his movements gentle, almost apologetic. Click. The ratchet released. Marcus Ellison didn't rub his wrists immediately. He didn't gasp. He stood up slowly, unfolding his frame with a dignity that made the police uniform look like a clown suit. He brought his hands in front of him, inspecting the deep red indentations where the metal had bitten into his skin. There was a small trickle of blood on his left wrist where the skin had broken. "Judge Ellison," Chief Pierce said, his voice tight, stepping onto the porch. He looked like a man watching his career burn down in real time. I don't have words. Are you all right?" Marcus looked at the chief. They had played golf together at a charity fundraiser a few months prior. They had discussed sentencing guidelines over scotch. Now, Pierce was looking at him like he was a bomb that had already detonated. "I'm injured, Harlan," Marcus said, his voice flat. "I have nerve damage in my right hand. I can feel the tingling. That's going to make signing your search warrants next week difficult." Pierce winced. "We'll get paramedics, immediately. Torres, call EMS." "No." Marcus raised a hand. "Not yet." Marcus turned his gaze to Whitaker. The young officer had backed down the steps and was standing on the grass, looking small. But even now, the arrogance lingered. Whitaker was whispering to his partner, pointing at Marcus, mouthing the words, "He wouldn't ID." "Officer Whitaker," Marcus called out. Whitaker looked up, startled. "Yeah? Not yeah." Special Agent Victor Hale of the FBI barked, stepping out of the unmarked sedan. He walked up the driveway, his badge hanging from his neck. "You address him as Your Honor, or Judge Ellison. Do you understand me?" Whitaker swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Come here," Marcus said. Whitaker hesitated. He looked at his chief. Pierce nodded, a sharp, angry jerk of the head. Whitaker walked back up the steps, standing 2 feet from the man he had just assaulted. "Do you know why I didn't identify myself?" Marcus asked quietly. Whitaker's jaw tightened. "Policy says—" "The law," Marcus interrupted, "says that a citizen on his own property, suspected of no specific articulable crime, has the right to be left alone. I didn't identify myself because I didn't have to. And I wanted to see if you were an officer of the law or a bully with a badge." Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Whitaker and the chief could hear. "You failed the test, son, and now you are going to be the lesson." I was doing my job, Whitaker muttered, unable to help himself. You fit the profile. The profile? Marcus raised an eyebrow. A black man in a house that costs more than you'll make in 10 lifetimes? That profile? That's enough, Pierce snapped. He turned to Whitaker. Turn around, Chief. Turn around, Pierce roared. Whitaker turned. Pierce reached out and unclipped the radio from Whitaker's shoulder. Then, with a yank that nearly pulled Whitaker off balance, he ripped the badge from Whitaker's shirt. The fabric tore slightly. Gun? Pierce demanded. Whitaker's eyes watered. This was the ultimate shame, to be disarmed in the field. Chief, come on. It was a mistake. He resisted. You saw the body cam. I am going to watch every second of that body cam, Pierce said, taking the service weapon from Whitaker's holster and handing it to Torres. And I pray to God it malfunctions, because if the audio is clear, you are going to prison. Get him out of here, Pierce ordered Torres. Put him in the back of the squad. He's not driving. He's suspended pending an internal investigation. Effective immediately. As Torres led a stunned, pale Whitaker away, the neighbors, who had gathered in a semicircle on the sidewalk, began to applaud. It wasn't a raucous cheer, but a slow, condemning clap. Mr. Harlan was still filming. Marcus watched the cruiser door slam shut on Whitaker. He didn't feel triumph. He felt exhausted. Olivia stepped out of the house then, carrying a towel and a bag of ice. She walked past the chief of police without looking at him and went straight to her husband. She gently wrapped the ice around his wrists. I'm calling your doctor, she said softly. I'm fine, Olivia. You are not fine, she hissed, tears finally spilling over. He could have killed you, Marcus. If you had reached for your phone, if you had stood up too fast. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Every black person in America knew how that sentence ended. Pierce cleared his throat. Judge, I want to assure you the department will handle this. We will do a full internal review. We'll handle this in-house. Marcus looked up from the ice pack. The in-house comment was exactly what he expected. The blue wall of silence was already trying to erect itself. Harlan, Marcus said, his voice hardening. You aren't handling this in-house. This is a federal matter now. Federal? Pierce paled. Marcus, come on, it's a bad stop. It's assault maybe, but let's not blow this up. He deprived me of my civil rights under color of law, Marcus recited. Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 242. That is a federal crime, and since I am a federal magistrate, and he interfered with my ability to perform my duties by injuring my hand. Marcus looked at the FBI agent standing by the luxury sedan. Agent Hale nodded grimly. The Bureau is already opening a file, Chief. We're taking jurisdiction, and we're taking the body cam footage now, before it gets corrupted or lost in your server room. Pierce looked defeated. He knew the game was over before it started. Torres! Pierce shouted. Give the agents the SD card from Whitaker's camera. Do not touch it. Do not pass go. Marcus sat back down on his wicker chair. The sun had fully set now. The porch light flickered on. I'm going to the hospital, Marcus announced. I need every bruise, every scratch, and every nerve impulse documented. And then, Harlan, then I'm calling the press. The video hit the internet early the next morning. Mr. Harlan hadn't just recorded it. He had uploaded it with a hashtag that spread like wildfire. By the time Marcus woke up after a fitful sleep aided by heavy painkillers, the video had millions of views. The clip was damning. It showed the calm, seated judge and the escalating manic aggression of Officer Whitaker. It showed the kick to the table. It showed the violent wrenching of the arm. And most crucially, it captured the audio perfectly. I don't care who you say you are. Marcus watched it on his tablet in the kitchen. His right hand was in a soft cast. The doctor had confirmed a severe sprain and potential nerve impingement in the ulnar nerve. "It's everywhere, Marcus," Olivia said, pouring him coffee. She looked tired. Her phone had been ringing since dawn. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they're all camped at the end of the subdivision. The HOA is furious. "Let them be furious," Marcus muttered. "I pay my dues." His phone buzzed. It was Marcus Thorne, the rep for the Fraternal Order of Lease. Thorne was a legendary fixer, a man who had saved the careers of cops who had done far worse than Whitaker. He was known as the Teflon Don of police unions. Marcus let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, the news cut to a live press conference at the police station. Chief Pierce stood at the podium, looking like he hadn't slept. But standing next to him, surprisingly, was not Whitaker, but Marcus Thorne. "Good morning," Pierce began. "We are aware of the incident involving Officer Whitaker and Judge Ellison. We take these allegations seriously." Thorne stepped in, practically elbowing the chief aside. Thorne was a short, stocky man with a thick neck and a thicker accent. "Let's be clear," Thorne boomed into the microphones. "The video you are seeing is a snippet. It lacks context. Officer Whitaker was responding to a call for service in a high-crime area." "Oak Creek is a high-crime area?" a reporter shouted. Thorne ignored the question. "Officer Whitaker followed protocol. The suspect—" Thorne paused, catching himself. "The individual refused a lawful order to identify. When an officer fears for his safety, he detains. That is the law. We stand by Officer Whitaker. He is a decorated veteran who deserves due process, not a trial by Twitter." Marcus turned off the tablet. "Decorated veteran," he scoffed. "He's been on the force 6 months. They're going to smear you," Olivia said, sitting down opposite him. "You know that, right? They're going to dig up every acquittal you ever signed. They're going to find that speeding ticket from years ago. They're going to say you hate cops." "I don't hate cops," Marcus said, standing up. "I hate bad ones." And Thorne just made a tactical error. "What error?" "He doubled down," Marcus said, a glint of the prosecutor returning to his eyes. "If they had apologized, if they had thrown Whitaker to the wolves immediately, I might have settled for a civil suit and his resignation. But now they're claiming what he did was policy." Marcus walked to the window. "If it's policy to assault a sitting federal judge on his porch," Marcus said, "then the policy is unconstitutional, and that means I can sue the city, the union, and the department for systemic failure. Thorne just handed me the keys to the Treasury." Later that afternoon, Shane Whitaker sat in his living room, the blinds drawn. His wife, Jessica, was crying in the kitchen. "They're saying you're a racist, Shane," she sobbed. "My mom called. She saw it on Facebook." "I'm not a racist," Whitaker shouted, throwing a beer can against the wall. It dented the drywall, leaving a wet stain. "I didn't know who he was. If he had just shown me his ID, none of this would have happened." Whitaker truly believed this. In his mind, he was the victim. He had been set up. The judge had baited him. It was a trap. His phone rang. It was Thorne. "Shane, listen to me," Thorne said. "Stay inside. Don't talk to anyone. We're putting you on paid administrative leave." "Paid?" Whitaker asked, hopeful. "Yeah. It's a vacation, kid. We're going to spin this. We found some dirt on the judge. He represented a controversial client back in the day as a public defender. We're going to paint him as an anti-police radical who provoked you." "Can you do that?" Whitaker asked. "Watch me," Thorne said. "Just keep your mouth shut. The DA, Gavin Thorne, is up for re-election. He needs the union's endorsement. He won't press charges. I promise you that. You'll be back on patrol in 6 months." Whitaker hung up, feeling a surge of relief. The system was working. The blue wall was holding. But across town, in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of a high-end law firm, Marcus Ellison was assembling his own wall. He wasn't representing himself. That was a fool's errand. He had hired Olivia Vance, a shark of a civil rights attorney who had made millions suing police departments in major cities. She was sharp, vicious, and theatrical. "Thorne is playing the bad apple defense in reverse," Olivia said, pacing the room. "He's trying to say the apple is good and the orchard is dangerous. He's going to attack your character." "Let him," Marcus said, examining his cast. "I want to file the 1983 suit tomorrow morning, but I want something else." "What?" "I want the internal affairs file on Whitaker," Marcus said. "The one from his previous department, the rural county up north. We can't get that without a subpoena, and that will take months," Olivia said. "No," Marcus smiled. "I have a friend in the clerk's office up there, a favor from a federal traffic case I presided over. Rumor is Whitaker didn't transfer voluntarily. He was allowed to resign to avoid prosecution." Olivia stopped pacing. Her eyes widened. "If that's true, and Pierce hired him anyway, then it's Monell liability," Marcus finished the thought. "It proves the department has a custom and practice of hiring dangerous officers and ignoring red flags. It blows the cap off the damages." "And," Olivia added, a wicked grin spreading across her face, "it means Chief Pierce knew he was handing a loaded gun to a ticking time bomb." Marcus nodded. "The union thinks they're fighting a PR battle. They don't realize they're walking into a federal buzzsaw." The intercom buzzed. "Judge Ellison, Agent Hale is on line 1. Marcus picked up the phone. "Agent Hale? Judge?" Hale's voice was clipped. "We just executed a search warrant on the police department's server room." "And?" "The body cam footage from the 2 backup officers, the ones who arrived right before the chief?" "Yes." "Deleted," Hale said. "Attempted scrub. A short time ago." Marcus closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. "They just added obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence to the list, didn't they?" "It gets better," Hale said. "The login credentials used to delete the footage, they belong to Chief Pierce." Marcus opened his eyes. The game had just changed. It wasn't just about a racist cop anymore. It was about a conspiracy. "Hale," Marcus said, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly calm register. "Go arrest the chief of police." The following Monday morning, the Oak Creek Police Department was operating with a nervous energy. The Judge incident, as it was being whispered in the break room, hung over the precinct like a toxic cloud. Chief Pierce sat in his office staring at his computer screen. He had spent the weekend making calls to the mayor, to Union Rep Marcus Thorne, even to a friend in the district attorney's office. He had been assured that the glitch in the server logs would hold up. He had been told that the FBI was bluffing, that they wouldn't raid a local police station over a misunderstanding involving a magistrate. He was wrong. Early that morning, the front double doors of the precinct burst open. It wasn't a subtle entry. A dozen agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI fanned out across the lobby. They didn't stop at the reception desk. They moved with the synchronized precision of a military unit. Agent Victor Hale led the charge, holding a folded piece of paper that Pierce recognized instantly. A federal search and seizure warrant. "Nobody moves. Hands off keyboards. Step away from your desks," Hale bellowed, his voice echoing off the tile floors. The station froze. Dispatchers stopped typing. Patrol officers mid-coffee raised their hands. Pierce stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He opened his office door just as Hale kicked the outer gate open. "Agent Hale?" Pierce tried to muster his command voice, but it cracked. "This is highly irregular. You can't just barge in here." "Chief Harlan Pierce," Hale said, ignoring the protest entirely. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, tampering with federal evidence, and conspiracy to deprive civil rights." The silence in the station was absolute. Every officer watched as their chief, the man who signed their paychecks, the man who held the keys to their promotions, was spun around and handcuffed. "You're making a mistake," Pierce hissed, his face flushing a deep crimson. "I have friends in D.C. You're going to need them," Hale replied, tightening the cuffs. "We recovered the deleted footage, Harlan. Your IT guy rolled on you moments ago. We have the keystroke logs. We know you used your admin password to wipe the backup officer's body cams." Pierce's knees buckled. The IT guy, a nervous civilian employee, was the weak link he hadn't accounted for. "Get him out of here," Hale ordered. Two agents marched the chief past his own subordinates. The shame was palpable. Officers looked down, refusing to meet his eyes. The blue wall wasn't just cracking. It was being demolished with a sledgehammer. Meanwhile, Shane Whitaker was sitting on his couch watching television, nursing a hangover. He was still under the impression that this was a temporary storm. Thorne had promised him the union lawyers would stall the investigation until the news cycle moved on to the next tragedy. Then his phone exploded with notifications. Chief Pierce arrested by FBI. Federal raid at Oak Creek PD. DOJ opens pattern or practice investigation. Whitaker dropped the remote. His stomach churned. If the chief was down, who was protecting him? He dialed Thorne. It went to voicemail. He dialed his sergeant. Voicemail. He dialed Torres, his partner. "Don't call me, Whitaker," Torres answered. His voice hushed and panicked. "Torres, what's happening? They took the chief. They took everyone's hard drives, man," Torres whispered. "The feds are tearing the place apart. They're looking for your file, Whitaker. The real one." "My file?" Whitaker felt a cold sweat prickle his neck. "What file?" "The one from your last department," Torres said. "The one Pierce hid in his safe. Rumor is you didn't just resign from your last job. Rumor is you beat a kid half to death, and Pierce buried it as a favor to your uncle in the state senate." The line went dead. Whitaker stared at the phone. It wasn't just a rumor. It was the truth. Years ago, he had fractured a teenager's orbital socket during a traffic stop. The county had settled with a strict non-disclosure agreement, and Whitaker had been allowed to resign quietly. Pierce had hired him knowing all of it, bypassing the background check because Whitaker's uncle, a powerful state senator, had promised Pierce funding for new tactical gear. It was a quid pro quo, and now the FBI had the safe. That evening, Marcus Ellison sat in his library, his hand still wrapped in a brace. Olivia, his attorney, sat opposite him, a stack of documents on the mahogany desk. "They found it," Olivia said, a predatory smile on her lips. "The ghost file." Pierce kept a physical copy in his personal safe, probably as leverage against you-know-who. Senator Whitaker. Marcus nodded. "I know him. He voted against my confirmation to the bench." "Karma is a circle," Olivia noted. "The FBI is charging Pierce and the senator with conspiracy, but that leaves Shane Whitaker exposed. The union is cutting him loose, Marcus. Thorne released a statement an hour ago saying the FOP does not condone the actions of officers who conceal prior misconduct. They're throwing him off the boat to save the ship," Marcus said, sipping his tea, this time safely indoors. "So he has no qualified immunity defense?" "None," Olivia said. "Qualified immunity protects officers who make reasonable mistakes in unclear situations. It does not protect officers who lie on their employment applications or chiefs who cover up violent pasts. The judge assigned to the civil suit, Judge Patricia Langford, already signaled she's going to strip Whitaker's immunity." Marcus leaned back. "So we proceed to deposition." "We do," Olivia said. "And I'm going to tear him apart." The deposition took place weeks later in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Atlanta. It was a sterile, cold environment designed to make people uncomfortable. Shane Whitaker sat at the long table wearing a suit that didn't fit him. He looked smaller without his uniform, without his badge, and without his gun. Beside him sat a court-appointed civil defense attorney, A weary man who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. Opposite them sat Olivia. She didn't have a stack of messy papers. She had a single slim binder and a tablet. Marcus Ellison sat in the corner, silent. He wasn't required to be there, but he chose to be. He wanted Whitaker to see him, not as a victim, but as the architect of his downfall. The videographer adjusted the camera. "We are on the record. Case number 24-CV-8892. Ellison versus Whitaker et al." Olivia began. Her voice was pleasant, almost friendly, which was the first sign of a trap. "Mr. Whitaker," she started. "State your name for the record." "Shane Whitaker. And you are currently unemployed. Is that correct?" "I'm on unpaid leave," Whitaker muttered. "Correction," Olivia smiled. "As of this morning, the city manager has formally terminated your employment due to the indictment of Chief Pierce and the discovery of your falsified application. Did you not receive the email?" Whitaker blanched. He looked at his lawyer. The lawyer shrugged. "News to me." Whitaker's hands clenched into fists on the table. He had been fired. It was real. "Let's talk about Sunday the 14th, Olivia continued. "You stated in your report, which we have proved was filed after you knew Judge Ellison's identity, that you feared for your safety. Why?" He was reaching," Whitaker stammered. "He had a glass. It could have been a weapon." "A glass of iced tea," Olivia clarified. "You felt threatened by a beverage?" "He was aggressive. He wouldn't identify himself." "His failure to identify. A crime in this state, Mr. Whitaker. If there is no reasonable suspicion of a crime." I thought there was a crime." "What crime?" Olivia leaned in. "Be specific. What exact crime was Marcus Ellison committing sitting on his porch?" "He looked like a suspect." "Which suspect?" Olivia swiped her tablet. A screen on the wall flickered to life. It showed the police dispatch logs for that day. There were no burglary calls in Oak Creek for several weeks prior to this event. No BOLO alerts. No suspect descriptions. "So when you say he looked like a suspect, what did you mean?" Whitaker stayed silent. He knew the trap. If he said burglar, he was lying. If he said nothing, he looked incompetent. "Did you mean he looked black, Mr. Whitaker?" Olivia asked softly. "No, I'm not a racist," Whitaker shouted, standing up halfway. "Sit down," his lawyer hissed. "Then explain it," Olivia pressed. "Explain why you drew your taser on a middle-aged magistrate judge within moments of exiting your vehicle." "I made a mistake," Whitaker whispered, defeated. "A mistake?" Olivia laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "No, Mr. Whitaker. A mistake is a typo. A mistake is forgetting your keys. Breaking a man's wrist and ending your own career because your ego couldn't handle a black man knowing the law better than you. That's not a mistake. That's malice." She flipped a page in her binder. "Let's talk about assets," she said, shifting gears instantly. "Since Judge Langford has denied your qualified immunity, you are personally liable for damages. Do you own your home, Mr. Whitaker?" "Yes," Whitaker said, his voice trembling. "Mortgage?" "Mostly paid off. Inheritance." "Good." Olivia noted it down. "And the truck parked outside? Is that yours?" "Yes." "Pension?" I have a 401k from my last job." "Not anymore," Olivia said, closing the binder. "You see, Mr. Whitaker, we aren't just suing the city for millions. We are suing you for everything you have. By the time we are done, you won't be able to afford the gas to drive that truck to the unemployment office." Whitaker looked at Marcus. For the first time, he saw the man. Not a suspect, not a perp, but a force of nature. "Why are you doing this?" Whitaker asked Marcus, breaking protocol. "You're a judge. You have money. Why take my house? I have a wife. Masaith, I have a kid on the way." Marcus stood up slowly. He walked over to the table. He placed his injured hand, still in the brace, on the polished wood. "You asked me why I didn't ID myself," Marcus said quietly. "I told you. I wanted to see if you were a bully. You were. And bullies don't stop until they are stopped. Marcus leaned down, his face inches from Whitaker's. I'm not taking your house because I need it, son. I'm taking it because you don't deserve the comfort of a home after you violated the sanctity of mine. You entered my sanctuary with violence. I am entering yours with the law. Marcus turned to Olivia. I'm done here. Finish him. The fallout was swift and brutal. The civil trial didn't even happen. Whitaker's insurance company refused to cover him because his actions were deemed willful and malicious, falling outside the scope of his policy. Without a defense fund, Whitaker was forced to settle. The terms were draconian. 1. Public apology. Whitaker had to read a prepared statement written by Marcus on camera, admitting to racial profiling and excessive force. 2. Asset seizure. The house was sold. The proceeds went to a legal defense fund for victims of police brutality. The truck was seized. 3. The bar. Whitaker was permanently decertified. He could never work in law enforcement or private security again, not even as a mall cop. Months later, the for sale sign was pulled out of the lawn of Whitaker's modest ranch house. Marcus Ellison sat in his car across the street, watching. A moving truck was being loaded up. Shane Whitaker, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, carried a box of clothes to a rusted sedan. His wife was already in the car, refusing to look at him. She was leaving him, moving back to her parents. The financial strain had broken the marriage. Whitaker looked up and saw the luxury sedan. He saw Marcus watching him. There was no anger left in Whitaker's face, just a hollow, haunting realization that he was the architect of his own hell. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just put the car in drive and pulled away, heading back to Oak Creek. He had court in the morning. The wheels of federal justice are known to grind slowly, but when they finally catch traction, they pulverize everything in their path. Over a year after the incident on the porch, the landscape of Oak Creek had been fundamentally altered. The Department of Justice had descended upon the town like a storm, tearing through the police department's records with forensic precision. The blue wall that Chief Harlan Pierce had spent a decade constructing wasn't just breached, it was demolished, brick by corrupt brick. The federal consent decree was the first domino. It mandated independent oversight, body camera audits for every shift, and a complete purge of the department's hiring practices. But the true climax came in the sterile, wood-paneled courtroom of the Federal District Court. Marcus's own workplace, though he sat in the gallery this time, a silent observer to the dismantling of a tyrant. Harlan Pierce, stripped of his uniform and his pride, looked small in his cheap suit. He had pleaded guilty to 1 count of deprivation of rights under color of law and 1 count of obstruction of justice. "Mr. Pierce," Judge Patricia Langford said from the bench, "you treated a public office as a private fiefdom. You are not a protector of the peace. You are a vandal of the Constitution." The sentence was 48 months, 4 full years, in a federal correctional institution. No parole. As the marshals clicked the handcuffs onto Pierce's wrists, Marcus simply watched, his face a mask of stone. Justice was being served. But for Marcus Ellison, true closure didn't come from a courtroom. It came from the quiet, painful work of rebuilding. His right hand had healed, but the nerve damage was permanent, a constant pins and needles sensation in his thumb. It was a daily reminder. Every time he picked up his gavel, he felt the ghost of Shane Whitaker's handcuffs. He used that feeling to ensure no officer in his courtroom ever got away with a bad stop again. The civil settlement from the city had been historic. Millions of dollars. Marcus hadn't kept a dime. He used the entire sum to establish the Ellison Legal Defense Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to providing top-tier representation for victims of police misconduct. It was a war chest that ensured no officer like Shane Whitaker would ever feel safe hiding behind a badge again. It was a Tuesday evening in autumn when Marcus finally saw the end of the story. Driving home from the clinic, he pulled into a dilapidated convenience store for gas. He walked inside for a receipt, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The clerk was stocking cigarettes, his back turned. He wore a faded red vest, his posture slumped and defeated. "Excuse me," Marcus said. "Pump 4 didn't give me a receipt." The clerk froze. He turned slowly. It was Shane Whitaker. The transformation was shocking. He looked years older. His arrogant sneer was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. Whitaker looked at Marcus, then darted his eyes down, unable to meet the judge's gaze. He slid the receipt through the metal slot of the bulletproof glass. "How are you, Shane?" Marcus asked softly. I'm working, sir," Whitaker whispered. "The bank took the house. My wife left. I'm trying to start over." Marcus nodded. He could have gloated, but he didn't. "Life is long, Shane. You have time to be a different man. But you have to choose to be him every single day." "I'm sorry," Whitaker said, a single tear tracking through his stubble. "I didn't know." "You didn't know who I was," Marcus corrected him. "But you should have known who you were supposed to be." Marcus walked out into the cold night. He got into his car and drove away, leaving Whitaker behind the glass. He was going home to his wife, his porch, and his peace. The court was finally adjourned. And that, everyone, is how the gavel finally drops. Shane Whitaker thought his badge gave him the right to be a bully, but he learned the hard way that true power doesn't come from a gun. It comes from the truth. He lost his career, his home, and his family, all because he couldn't check his ego at the door. Meanwhile, Judge Ellison turned a moment of trauma into a legacy of justice that will protect his community for decades. This story isn't just about one bad cop. It's about the system that protects them and what happens when someone finally has the resources to fight back. It begs the question, if Marcus hadn't been a federal judge, how would this story have ended? We all know the answer, and that is the scariest part. What do you think? Did Whitaker deserve a second chance? Or was his punishment exactly what he earned? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes justice and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. We post new true crime and justice sagas every week. Thanks for watching. And remember, the truth always comes out in the end.